WrestleMania, I was gonna kill Hulkamania.
It's no secret that Vince McMahon and Hulk Hogan had a love-hate relationship, but even after death, the drama isn't buried. Vince has finally broken his silence on Hogan's passing, and what he's revealing isn't just cold, it's downright brutal. From backstage betrayals to disturbing claims of abuse, Vince is airing it all out. I've got the full breakdown. Let's get into it. Steroid scandals and backstage betrayals. Hulk Hogan was once hailed as the ultimate American hero, the face of professional wrestling, a symbol of strength, charisma, and patriotism. But behind all the red and yellow, behind the iconic mustache and larger-than-life persona, lies a much darker truth. According to former insiders like Mahone, the image fans worshipped was nothing more than a carefully crafted illusion. And one of the most jarring truths, even Hogan's legendary physique, the very thing that made him a superstar, wasn't natural. Behind the muscles was a secret cocktail of steroids and performance enhancers, quietly fueling the hero millions looked up to.
Was it pretty just a normal thing that people were using?
Yeah. I mean, it's like, I think it was 1990, it became illegal.
Oh, it was legal before that?
Oh, yeah. You go to the doctor, you get a prescription for it.
The truth is, wrestling fans, anabolic steroids were completely legal in the United States until the Anabolic Steroids Control Act of 1990 classified them as controlled substances. Before that watershed moment, getting steroids was as simple as walking into your doctor's office with a prescription pad. But when that legislation hit like a surprise heel turn, it transformed what was once a routine medical practice into a federal crime. And suddenly, the entire wrestling industry found itself in the crosshairs of federal investigators who were hungry for their next big takedown.
And then Vince McMahon was on his, major role with his company doing great, and the federal government targeted him,
So he had to clean things up.
Eventually. They targeted him and they drugged the poster boy in. Well, if you're going to go for Vince, let's get Hogan.
The federal government didn't just stumble into this investigation by accident, wrestling warriors. They orchestrated it, perfectly planned wrestling storyline, with one crucial difference. The stakes were real, and the consequences could destroy lives and careers forever. When federal prosecutor Sean O'Shea set his sights on Vince McMahon and the World Wrestling Federation, he knew exactly what strategy would deliver maximum impact. Go after the poster boy, the golden goose, the man whose name was synonymous with wrestling itself, Hulk Hogan. This wasn't just about catching a few wrestlers using performance-enhancing drugs, folks. This was about dismantling what investigators believed was a systematic network of steroid distribution that reached from the highest levels of corporate management all the way down to the locker rooms where dreams were made and bodies were pushed beyond their natural limits. The investigation, which began in 1991, following the conviction of Dr. George Zahorian III for illegally distributing steroids to WWF wrestlers, had one primary target in its crosshairs, proving that Vince McMahon orchestrated a corporate culture that not only encouraged but facilitated widespread steroid abuse. Before we dive deeper into Hogan's role in this earth-shattering scandal, we need to understand the man who started it all, Dr. George T. Zahorian III, a Pennsylvania-based urologist who served as the WWF's ringside physician. Between 1984 and 1989, Zahorian supplied steroids to dozens of WWF wrestlers, often mailing them directly to performers or distributing them at events like some kind of pharmaceutical Santa Claus with a very specific gift list. When Zahorian was convicted in 1991 and sentenced to 3 years in prison, it was like watching the first domino fall in what would become a catastrophic chain reaction. His conviction triggered the federal investigation that would eventually target McMahon and drag Hulk Hogan into a legal nightmare that would forever change how the world viewed the Immortal One. Now here comes the part that every wrestling fan needs to understand, because this is where our beloved Hulkster went from being wrestling royalty to becoming the star witness in a federal case that could have sent Vince McMahon to prison for 8 years. In 1992, facing potential charges and a possible 17-year prison sentence for perjury or drug-related offenses, Hogan made a deal with federal prosecutors that would grant him immunity in exchange for his complete and total cooperation. But here's where the story gets even more dramatic than a last-minute cage match stipulation change. Wrestling fans. Before Hogan ever stepped foot in that courtroom, he had already made one of the most catastrophic public relations mistakes in wrestling history. In 1991, during an appearance on the Arsenio Hall show, Hogan looked directly into the camera, and with that familiar confidence that had carried him through countless battles with Andre the Giant and Macho Man Randy Savage, denied using steroids, claiming his physique came from training, prayers, and vitamins, the very catchphrase that had endeared him to millions of children worldwide. This is where Vince McMahon's version of events, as revealed in the explosive Netflix documentary series Mr. McMahon, becomes absolutely crucial crucial to understanding the depth of betrayal and miscommunication that was tearing apart the wrestling world's most important partnership. According to McMahon's account in the documentary, he had specifically advised Hogan to come clean about his steroid use during that fateful Arsenio Hall appearance, warning that denial would only invite further scrutiny from federal investigators. McMahon's frustration is palpable when he recounts the events in the documentary, explaining his strategic thinking with the kind of calculated business acumen that had built his wrestling empire. "I held a press conference and said, I took steroids. Not anymore. We're going to establish protocols and procedures to make certain none of our performers do either." The same day, Hulk Hogan went on the Arsenio Hall show. "My suggestion to him is to come clean. That's not what happened." Think about that for a moment, wrestling enthusiasts. While McMahon was taking the corporate approach, accepting responsibility and implementing changes, Hogan was on national television essentially calling everyone liars and presenting himself as the victim of a massive conspiracy. Hogan himself would later admit in the Mr. McMahon documentary, "I self-destructed my own self. That was one of the worst decisions I ever made, not listening to Vince." When July 1994 arrived, and Hulk Hogan finally took the witness stand in that Uniondale, New York courtroom, the wrestling world held its collective breath. What happened next would shatter the image of the all-American hero more completely than any steel cage match or ladder match ever could. Under oath, Hogan admitted to using anabolic steroids for 14 years, from the mid-1970s to the late 1980s, completely contradicting his earlier public denials and revealing the extent to which performance-enhancing drugs had shaped the physique that made him a global icon. But the testimony went even deeper into the relationship between wrestling's two most powerful figures. Hogan revealed that he had not only used steroids extensively, but had actually shared them with Vince McMahon on occasion, as both men trained together. However, in what would prove to be crucial testimony for McMahon's legal defense, Hogan was clear that McMahon never directly supplied him with steroids, nor did he witness McMahon instructing Dr. Zahorian to distribute them to wrestlers. The financial and reputational damage from this scandal was absolutely devastating, brothers and sisters. The trial cost the WWF millions in legal fees and severely damaged its public image at a time when the company was already struggling financially due to declining attendance and competition from World Championship Wrestling. The WWF was literally teetering on the brink of bankruptcy in 1994, fighting for survival in ways that made their scripted storylines seem tame by comparison. For Hulk Hogan personally, the admission of steroid use shattered his role model persona more completely than any villain's finishing move ever could. His Arsenio Hall denial was widely mocked, and fans felt betrayed by what they saw as years of lies from the man who had preached about the power of training, prayers, and vitamins. The golden era of Hulkamania, built on the foundation of an all-American hero overcoming impossible odds through natural strength and determination, crumbled like a house of cards in a tornado. Hogan left the WWF in 1993, partly due to the steroid scandal's fallout and his desire to pursue acting opportunities. When he eventually joined World Championship Wrestling in 1994, he would reinvent himself as Hollywood Hogan, leading the New World Order and embracing a heel persona that, in many ways, reflected the public's changing perception of the man behind the character. Hogan's pattern of deception and violence wasn't limited to backroom betrayals and courtroom confessions. The awful truth that McMahon and others would eventually reveal included shocking incidents of unprovoked aggression that demonstrated Hogan's true character when the cameras weren't rolling for a scripted show. The most infamous example occurred just days before the first ever WrestleMania, when Hogan appeared on Richard Belzer's talk show, Hot Properties, alongside Mr. T, to promote the groundbreaking event. Belzer, being a comedian, was eager for the wrestlers to demonstrate a move, dismissing wrestling as fake, something that was a big no-no in those days. What happened next would demonstrate the real Hulk Hogan, stripped of his heroic persona and revealed as a man capable of shocking violence against an unsuspecting victim. With the audience encouraging him and WrestleMania promotion on his mind, Hogan initially refused Belzer's request for a demonstration, but the comedian kept pushing until Hogan finally snapped. With the audience egging him on, Hogan put Belzer in a front chin lock, choking him, out for real, and letting his limp body drop to the floor. The incident was captured on live television, showing millions of viewers the real Hulk Hogan, not the scripted hero of wrestling storylines, but a man who would use his superior size and strength to assault someone who was simply doing their job as a talk show host. Belzer later sued Hogan for $5 million in damages, and the case was settled out of court. But the damage to Hogan's true character was irreversible for those who witnessed it. The steroid lies, the betrayal, and the unprovoked violence were harbingers of even more shocking revelations to come. Revelations that would expose not just professional misconduct, but deeply troubling personal beliefs and behaviors that would shock even his most loyal fans and force the wrestling industry to confront uncomfortable truths about one of its most celebrated celebrated figures. Racist revelations and political controversies. One of the most damning truths about Hulk Hogan came when he was exposed as an alleged racist. In the leaked transcript from his infamous sex tape, Hogan was caught making vile, racially charged comments about his daughter Brooke's dating choices. In the recording, he didn't just slip up, he unleashed a string of racial slurs, including repeated use of the N-word, revealing a disturbing level of comfort with some of the most hateful language in the American lexicon. What shocked even his harshest critics wasn't just the words, but the mindset behind them. At one point, Hogan openly declared, "I am a racist to a point," and went on to say he'd be fine with Brooke dating a black man as long as he was rich. It wasn't just offensive. It exposed a transactional, deeply rooted prejudice that reduced people to status and stereotypes. The immediate response from WWE and Vince McMahon was swift and uncompromising, demonstrating that even the company's loyalty to its biggest historical draw had limits when confronted with such blatant racism. Within hours of the transcript's release, WWE terminated Hogan's contract and removed all references to him from their website. It was a corporate death sentence that erased decades of history and millions of dollars in potential revenue. But McMahon understood that associating with such toxic racism would irreparably damage the company's brand and relationship with its diverse global audience. Hogan's profile was erased from the WWE Hall of Fame, and his merchandise was pulled from the WWE shop, marking one of the most complete corporate cancellations in entertainment history. The company issued a statement condemning Hogan's remarks and emphasizing their commitment to diversity and inclusion, but the damage went far beyond corporate public relations. This was Vince McMahon confronting the awful truth that the man he had built his empire around harbored beliefs that were fundamentally incompatible with the values his company claimed to represent. As more transcripts came out, it was revealed that Hogan also used a homophobic slur while talking about a storyline VH1 wanted for his reality show, Hogan Knows Best. The pattern of bigotry extended beyond racial prejudice to encompass multiple forms of discrimination and hatred, painting a picture of a man whose private conversations were filled with the kind of language that would make even the most hardened wrestling fans cringe with embarrassment. VH1 asked Hogan to revisit his childhood home, but he had nothing nice to say about the current resident. On the tapes, Hogan used a slur to describe the person living in his old house. The casual nature of these slurs revealed a man who was comfortable expressing hatred and prejudice in private conversations, suggesting that such language and attitudes were deeply ingrained rather than momentary lapses in judgment. Hogan's attempts at damage control following the racist scandal only served to highlight the awful truth about his character that McMahon and others had been forced to confront. Hogan asked for forgiveness and opened up about having suicidal thoughts in an interview that aired Monday on Good Morning America, marking his first sit-down interview since being fired by WWE. But his explanations and excuses only made the situation worse, revealing a man who seemed more concerned with rehabilitating his image than genuinely confronting his prejudices. "I'm not a racist, but I never should have said what I said. It was wrong. I'm embarrassed by it," Hogan said, adding, "People need to realize that you inherit things from your environment. And where I grew up was South Tampa, Port Tampa, and it was a rough neighborhood, very low income. And all my friends, we greeted each other saying that word." The explanation attempted to deflect responsibility by blaming his upbringing and environment, but it only served to highlight his inability to take full accountability for his actions and beliefs. The response from the AEW wrestling community and fans to these revelations was swift and decisive, with many of Hogan's former colleagues and supporters distancing themselves from the disgraced star. Black wrestlers like Titus O'Neil criticized the apology as insincere, recognizing that Hogan's words rang hollow when compared to the venom captured on the sex tape recordings. The awful truth that McMahon had been forced to confront was now public knowledge, and the wrestling world was struggling to reconcile the hero they had known with the bigot who had been revealed. McMahon's decision to eventually reinstate Hogan to the WWE Hall of Fame in 2018 demonstrated the complex business calculations that entertainment executives must make when dealing with controversial figures. While the reinstatement was positioned as an opportunity for redemption and education, it was met with significant backlash from fans and wrestlers who felt that Hogan's racism hadn't been adequately addressed. Hogan's final WWE appearance in January 2025 was met with boos from fans, indicating that the wrestling audience hadn't forgiven or forgotten his racist remarks. The political dimension of Hogan's controversial public persona reached its most visible peak during the 2024 Republican National Convention. Convention, where his appearance demonstrated how his personal beliefs had evolved into active political advocacy for divisive figures and causes. Hogan's speech at the RNC wasn't just a celebrity endorsement, it was a full-throated embrace of political rhetoric that many viewed as inflammatory and divisive, further cementing his transformation from beloved entertainer to controversial political figure.
All you lowlifes, all you scumbags, all you drug dealers, and all you crooked politicians need to answer one question, brother. What you gonna do when Donald Trump and all the Trumpomaniacs run wild on you, brother?
The language and tone of Hogan's RNC speech revealed a man who had fully embraced a combative us versus them mentality that divided the American public into heroes and villains in much the same way his wrestling storylines had done decades earlier. The personal scandals and moral failures that had already been exposed would pale in comparison to the intimate betrayals and family destruction that would soon come to light, revealing a man whose private life was even more troubled and controversial than his public persona suggested. Marriage disasters, and the sex tape scandal. The foundation of Hogan's personal destruction was laid during his tumultuous marriage to Linda Claridge, a relationship that began with promise and ended in one of the most financially devastating divorces in entertainment history. Hulk, born Terry Bollea, and Linda Claridge met in 1981 and quickly fell in love. By 1983, they were married in a grand ceremony, beginning what many thought would be a lifelong partnership. At the time, Linda was a model and actress who brought her own flair to their relationship, creating what appeared to be the perfect power couple as Hogan's wrestling career exploded into mainstream success. The early years of their marriage coincided with the peak of Hulkamania, when Hogan was dominating wrestling rings around the world and becoming a household name that transcended sports entertainment. As Hulk's career took off, so did their public profile. He became a household name, dominating the wrestling world with his impressive physique and unforgettable matches. Their lifestyle became increasingly extravagant, with the couple living in a luxury mansion in Bel Air, Florida, and enjoying all the perks that came with Hogan's massive success and growing wealth. In 2005, they starred in the reality TV show Hogan Knows Best, which gave fans a peek into their seemingly perfect family life. The show presented Hogan as the loving but overprotective father, Linda as the supportive mother, and their children Brooke and Nick as typical teenagers, navigating the complexities of growing up in the spotlight. The show was a hit, reinforcing Hogan's image as a family man who had successfully balanced his wrestling career with his responsibilities as a husband and father. But behind the cameras and beneath the glossy veneer of reality television success, the Hogan marriage was crumbling under the weight of infidelity, neglect, and the corrosive effects of fame and fortune. The pressures of fame, Hulk's grueling wrestling schedule, and constant media attention took their toll. The same character flaws that had led Hogan to betray his fellow wrestlers and lie about his steroid use were now destroying his marriage and family from within. Rumors of Hulk's infidelity began to spread, with him often away from home and Linda left to handle the household and kids. The pattern of deception that had defined Hogan's professional life was now poisoning his personal relationships, as he prioritized his own desires over the commitments he had made to his wife and children. The man who preached about loyalty and doing the right thing was systematically betraying the people who should have mattered most to him. In 2007, their seemingly perfect marriage fell apart. VH1 canceled Hogan Knows Best, and shortly after, Linda filed for divorce. The news shocked fans who had bought into the happy family image presented on their reality show, struggling to reconcile the picture-perfect Hogan family with the ugly reality of their disintegrating marriage. What followed was a media spectacle that laid bare the most intimate details of their relationship and revealed the true extent of Hogan's personal failures. The divorce proceedings became a public circus that exposed not just the end of a marriage, but the systematic financial destruction that would leave Hogan financially devastated for years to come. The financial fallout from Hulk Hogan and Linda Hogan's divorce was huge. Once the dust settled from their very public split, it was clear just how much Hulk had lost. One of the biggest shocks was the amount of cash Linda ended up with. Out of the $10.4 million in their bank accounts, Linda took home a staggering $7.44 million. Hulk was left with just $2.98 million, a tiny fraction of the wealth he had worked decades to accumulate. Linda was awarded 40% ownership of Hulk's businesses. Hulk Hogan was ordered by the court to pay $180,000 to Linda Hogan's lawyers to cover her legal bills, with these fees continuing to accrue as Hogan delayed transferring the settlement amount to her. The financial burden of the divorce was compounded by the emotional toll of losing his family and seeing his life's work redistributed to pay for his personal failures. But the most shocking aspect of the divorce proceedings wasn't the financial devastation. It was the revelation of the specific infidelities that had destroyed the marriage. Linda Hogan accused Hogan of having an affair with their daughter's friend, Christiane Plant, an accusation that highlighted not just Hogan's unfaithfulness, but the predatory nature of his behavior toward young women in his family's social circle. The affair represented a betrayal that went beyond simple marital infidelity. It was a violation of the trust and safety that should have existed within his own family unit. The personal scandals that emerged from Hogan's divorce were just a preview of the even more devastating sex tape scandal that would ultimately cost him over $100 million and destroy one of his closest friendships. In 2012, a scandalous sex tape featuring Hulk Hogan and Heather Clem, the wife of his close friend Bubba the Love Sponge, was leaked. The tape wasn't just a momentary indiscretion. It was the product of a systematic betrayal of friendship that revealed the true depths of Hogan's moral corruption.
The allegations in that lawsuit state that approximately 6 years ago, the Clems secretly videotaped Mr. Hogan having private, consensual, intimate relations in a private bedroom. Mr. Hogan had no knowledge that he was being videotaped.
Hogan had a tight-knit friendship with Bubba, whose real name is Todd Allen Clem, a controversial radio personality known for his provocative style. Hogan frequently appeared on Bubba's radio show, and they were often seen together at public events, creating the public image of a strong and close friendship that extended deeply into their personal lives. Hogan trusted Bubba completely, and this trust extended to Bubba's wife, Heather, a former model who was often in the company of both men in what seemed like a close, comfortable relationship. But the awful truth that would emerge from this triangle of friendship was far more sordid and calculated than anyone could have imagined. Hogan's relationship with Heather was not just friendly, it was intimate. What made this betrayal even more shocking was that their private moments were being recorded without Hogan's knowledge, turning his infidelity into a weapon that would eventually be used to destroy him financially and professionally. Unbeknownst to Hogan, their private moments were being recorded. Bubba had installed surveillance cameras throughout his house, claiming they were for security, but these cameras weren't just capturing potential intruders, they were systematically documenting Hogan's intimate encounters with his best friend's wife, creating a library of compromising material that would eventually be used against him in the most devastating way possible. Bubba later claimed Hogan knew about the cameras, a statement Hogan strongly denied. The question of Hogan's knowledge about the recording became a central issue in the legal battles that followed, but regardless of what he knew or when he knew it, the existence of the tape represented a complete violation of privacy and trust that would have far-reaching consequences for everyone involved.
It was filed against Gawker Media and its related entities and individuals. It alleges that the defendants posted excerpts of the videotape at their website, Gawker.com, for the purpose of obtaining financial profit at the expense of Mr. Hogan and in violation of his rights of privacy.
When the tape was leaked, Hogan was devastated. He testified in court that he had no idea he was being recorded and felt completely humiliated by the public release of the tape. The revelation that his most intimate moments had been captured and distributed for public consumption represented a new low in a life that had already been marked by scandal and controversy. But this wasn't just personal humiliation. It was the beginning of a legal and financial nightmare that would consume years of his life and cost him relationships, reputation, and tens of millions of dollars. The publication of the sex tape by Gawker Media in 2012 created a media firestorm that dwarfed even the racist scandal that would follow years later. The tape, published by Gawker Media, a site known for its sensational content, made headlines everywhere. The media coverage was relentless and invasive, with news outlets examining every detail of the tape and talk shows discussing the scandal from every conceivable angle. Hogan's life was turned upside down by this. He was constantly followed by paparazzi, and every aspect of his life was scrutinized. The public humiliation he faced was unprecedented in the world of sports entertainment, affecting both his personal relationships and his professional opportunities. But Hogan knew he had to fight back, not just to protect his reputation, but to seek justice for what he saw as a fundamental violation of his privacy and human dignity. To tackle the situation, Hogan assembled a legal team and filed a lawsuit against Gawker Media. He sought $100 million in damages for invasion of privacy, claiming that Gawker had violated his rights by publishing the tape without his consent and causing him severe emotional distress. The lawsuit represented more than just a quest for financial compensation. It was a battle for the principle that even public figures have a right to privacy in their most intimate moments.
The acts of Gawker Media are illegal, outrageous, and exceed the bounds of human decency. The lawsuit against Gawker seeks damages in the amount of $100 million.
The legal battle that followed would become one of the most significant privacy cases of the digital age, with implications that extended far beyond Hogan's personal situation. During the proceedings, shocking details emerged about the secret financial backing that was driving Hogan's case. One of the most shocking twists in the case was the revelation of billionaire Peter Thiel's involvement. Thiel, a co-founder of PayPal and an early investor in Facebook, had a personal vendetta against Gawker. In 2007, Gawker had outed Thiel as gay, a move that Thiel never forgave. He saw the Hogan case as an opportunity to exact revenge on the media outlet that had wronged him. Thiel secretly funded Hogan's legal battle, pouring millions of dollars into the lawsuit. The revelation that Hogan's case was being bankrolled by a billionaire with his own agenda added another layer of complexity to an already convoluted situation, raising questions about the true motivations behind the legal action. The trial itself became a media spectacle that rivaled anything Hogan had ever experienced in the wrestling ring. Hogan himself took the stand, delivering an emotional testimony about the impact the tape had on his life. He described feeling completely humiliated and devastated by the release of the tape, painting a vivid picture of the personal toll the scandal had taken on him and his family. Gawker, on the other hand, defended its actions as a matter of public interest and free speech. The media outlet argued that Hogan was a public figure and that the tape was newsworthy. They claimed that their publication of the tape was protected under the First Amendment and that they had a right to report on the private lives of public figures, regardless of how that reporting was obtained or the damage it might cause. But the jury wasn't swayed by Gawker's free speech arguments. After 2 weeks of testimony and arguments, the case was handed over to the jury. On March 18th, the jury delivered a verdict in Hogan's favor, awarding him $115 million in compensatory damages and $25 million in punitive damages. The massive verdict was more than just a financial windfall for Hogan. It was a complete vindication of his position and a devastating blow to Gawker's business model. The verdict was a massive blow to Gawker, which was forced to declare bankruptcy and shut down its operations. The lawsuit had achieved what many thought was impossible. It had actually succeeded in destroying a major media outlet through the power of the legal system and unlimited financial resources. For Hogan, it represented the ultimate revenge against those who had violated his privacy and dignity. But even this massive legal victory couldn't undo the damage that had been done to Hogan's personal relationships and family life. The financial windfall from the Gawker verdict was complicated by the terms of his divorce settlement with Linda. This aspect of the settlement became particularly significant when Hulk won the $115 million lawsuit against Gawker for releasing the sex tape. As part of the divorce settlement, Linda was entitled to a share of that settlement, further adding to her financial gains. The ongoing legal and personal ramifications of the sex tape scandal continue to reverberate through Hogan's life even today. Fast forward to 2024, and Hollywood heavyweights Ben Affleck and Matt Damon have decided to bring this controversial story to the big screen. The decision by such prominent actors and filmmakers to tackle Hogan's story demonstrates the lasting cultural impact of his scandals and the continued public fascination with his fall from grace. Hogan, now 71 years old, has issued a stern warning to the actors, making it clear that he will not hesitate to pursue legal options if the film portrays him in a negative light or distorts the facts of the scandal. The threat of legal action represents Hogan's continued attempt to control the narrative around his life and scandals, even as the awful truth about his character and actions has become part of the public record. The man who had preached to millions of children about doing the right thing had systematically done the wrong thing at every crucial moment in his life. The hero who had represented the triumph of good over evil in wrestling storylines had revealed himself to be a villain in his own life story, betraying friends, family, and fans with equal callousness. The awful truth that McMahon exposed wasn't just about specific scandals or controversies. It was about the fundamental falseness of everything Hogan had claimed to represent. When Hulk Hogan passed away on July 24th, 2025, the wrestling world was forced to confront the complex legacy of a man who had been both their biggest star and their greatest disappointment. The awful truth that Vince McMahon had revealed over the decades served as a stark reminder that heroes are often more fragile and flawed than their public personas suggest, and that the price of deception and moral failure is ultimately measured not just in dollars and cents, but in the destruction of trust, relationships, and the very values that make heroism possible in the first place. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed watching this video, click on one of the boxes playing on your screen to watch more similar content.